Down.
Tes.
Oke. Opening opposition.
Tes.
Closing opposition. Udah hidup belum? Coba pencet dulu. Bang. Oke, tolong kembali dicek kembali. Sorry. Ini kayaknya harusnya aman sih.
Cek. Tes. Cek.
Tes.
Oke, mungkin sudah bisa untuk dimulai. Oke. Alright, live stream aman? Oke.
All right. Welcome to round 9, the last PDO round for NUDC 2024. My name is Hans. I'll be your chair. Judging this round will be me, Cynthia, as well as Rizky Ananda. As per usual, Judge River as a panel, as a collective, i.e. member of the House, panel, judges, etc. In opening government, we have Ciputra Surabaya, opening opposition Udayana, closing government Surabaya, and closing opposition International Batam. Just general reminder, number 1, please make sure that you speak with the microphone, especially when this is live stream. All the audio need to come out in the live stream, so please make sure that everyone use the audio, the microphone, and if there's anything that you want to say, i.e. trigger warning, and something like that, please say it before you start your own speeches. Cool. Under the motion on this House believes that the concept of forgiveness being a virtue is obsolete. Opening government, Prime Minister, the floor is yours. Here.
Excuse me, before I begin, can I have some sort of timing device up here with me? Test. Is this good? Okay. Okay, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panel, realize right now in the status quo that forgiveness is currently being seen as virtue, right? What does this mean exactly? It means that people will be supported and asked to forgive others irregardless of actions, right? Why? Because it gives the perceptions that you always need to forgive others in order to be a good person, right, in this case, right? Because in this case, forgiveness is virtue, right? Now, the thought of forgiving, right, by definition, it means that forgiving someone, for example, in this case, is the right thing to do. Right now, realize nowadays that bad things will always happen, right, regardless of whether or not this is true, right? So we will do bad things to each other, for example. Humans will do bad things to each other. Humans will do bad things to animals, and to lots of things, right? So bad things will happen irregardless, right? Now, why is this important? Why? Because it realized that the forgiving means that you accept what had happened. For example, if someone attack you, for example, someone may do something bad to you, for example, say something mean to you, for example, it means that you have to accept what had happened. You have to forgive them for it because you wanted to be a good person, right? You wanted to be seen as a good person. You wanted people to perceive you as a good person. Therefore, you are forced then to forgive those kind of people. You are taught to forgive those kind of people, and are forced to just say move on or let go those kind of things, right? Now, in this debate, I think OG will prove to you why this is genuinely bad, especially since bad things will always happen, and why this kind of ability to not forgive someone works as a check and balances to those kind of regards. Right now, moving on to OG's case. Right now, why do we think that forgiveness in this case works as a check and balances? First of all, because bad things will always happen, I would argue that not everyone in this case deserves to be forgiven. Why? First of all, think about it this way: if you're in, say, a toxic relationship, for example, right, which always happens on both sides, right? People have different opinions. People changes, for example. First you like them, and then suddenly, they reveal their true self, for example, or they change, for example, so kind of things, right? So those kind of, say, toxic relationship between couples, for example, will always happen, right? Now, what would happen if forgiveness is virtue? That means that every time your toxic partner, for example, do something to you, do something bad to you, do something selfish to you, you will then have to forgive them, right? You will then have to say, it's okay, I forgive you, and those stuff like that. You then have to accept that they did something bad to you, and then you move on. What does that mean? It means that now you don't have any this kind of opted out mechanism out of that relationship. You are now stuck within that relationship. You are now stuck with the toxic partner. You are now stuck with everything bad that they have, right? You now have no, in this case, a way out where you are seen as a good person, right? Because, if you choose to, I don't like this, break up, and then you are seen as a bad person. Therefore, you are now then attacked, right? You're simply attacked because you fail to forgive that kind of person. Because you forget to feel those kind of person, right? Now, why is this kind of opted out? Why is this kind of ability to actually get out of that relationship is good in the first place? First of all, it's endangering happiness, right? We have this kind of ability. We need to have this kind of ability to actually enjoy happiness, right? When you're stuck on that toxic relationship, you therefore deny an ability to actually go into a healthy relationship. You deny an ability to try new things, for example, right? Because you're now stuck with a toxic relationship simply because you will now be seen and judged by the society as a bad person, right? Now, why is this very important? You have the right to save yourself in this case. You have the right for happiness, right? Why? Simply because of humans in this case have limited capabilities, right? We have limited time, we have limited things that we can take, we can have limited, say, emotions that we can handle, for example, right? So we can also, in this case, it's very much a virtue, it's very, not a virtue, but it's very much important to actually focus on yourself, right? You need to focus on giving your limited time to your loved ones, for example. You need to give time to enjoy life, for example, right? Due to such as a human have the agency to pursue happiness, right? Because things such as birth lottery, for example, you don't know, you know, you don't choose to be born, so you need to have at least the agency to choose where you want to go to to gain happiness, right? However, in this case, when you lose that agency, you lose that kind of ability to choose because you're then not being able to opt out of this kind of ability, right? You then cannot say, for example, pursue something that you like because maybe your toxic partner hated it, for example. You cannot say spend more time with your family, with your friends who's there to support you, who's very important to you, right? Those kind of things will definitely not exist when forgiveness is seen as a virtue because then you will be deemed as evil for not forgiving your toxic partner. And now moving on. Moving on to the second argument regarding on possibility of regarding on consequences, right? When you forgive someone, you means that you accepted what had happened. You're ready to move on. You're ready to, in the sense, let it go, right? What does it mean? It means that the consequences that they face will be less, right? Because what? When you hate someone, you wanted them to face what they deserve, right? When you hate someone, when you're in a disagreement with someone, you wanted them to face what they deserve, right? However, in this case, when you have this kind of forgiveness, you might think that, oh, they don't really need those kind of, say, punishment, for example, right? Even though they did something bad, for example, right? Say they murder your say for example they hurt you, for example, right? They cheat on you, for example, and those kind of things. You say that, oh, they don't really need those kind of say punishment, for example, right? What will happen is that first of all you allow those kind of behavior, you promote those kind of behavior because now people have less things to worry about. They say that, oh, I don't have to worry about this kind of thing because that person will always forgive me, for example, right? So I will, so you know the consequences say will not be severe, for example, right? Say for example if you're in a relationship and you cheat with someone, instead of breaking up, maybe you just sleep on the couch, for example. Those kind of things is not really fair for the person, right? Those kind of, say, the consequences is very, very much less in this case. So it will not, say, in this case, prevent them from doing it again, right? Because they know that even if they do something bad, even if they do something bad to other people, even if they do something bad to their loved ones, they will always be forgiven. They will likely be forgiven. They will likely to be forgiven anyway. They will likely to be forgiven anyway, right? They will likely to be forgiven anyway, right? Now, why this is bad? Because this is actually, again, it promotes those kind of behavior, right? Now, why this is bad? Because not only does this promote those kind of behavior, it in this case also endangers other people, right? Now you have this kind of, say, perceptions of, say, people, oh, if you're in this kind of, if you're in this kind of bad situations, you have to always forgive them, right? You cannot give them the worst of the worst, right? Those kind of people definitely does not deserve those kind of things because it's, in this case, it's their own fault. They choose to do it. They have the agency and they choose to do those kind of things. So therefore, they need those kind of, those kind of, in this case, those kind of consequences in order to work as some sort of a way to stop them, from actually doing it. Stop from doing it. Stop from doing it. All right. Right now. Now going back, why do we think that this is very much an important thing to bring? Right now, think about this way. When you're forgiving someone, when you're letting go of something, it doesn't really, even though in this case it does bring you some sort of say in this case, such as say generally relaxed feelings, for example, it doesn't change the fact that they did something back to you, right? They did something back, so principally they have to take care of it, right? They have to, in this case, pay for what they did, pay for what they, principally they have to pay for what they did, right? They did something bad, so they have to pay for it. So why is it that they can get away with this kind of things on the opposition side of the house? Because we are forced then, we are then forced to forgive them, right? We are forced to lessen their consequences, right? With that in mind, we are, as OCHI, we are very, very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, PM, for that fine speech. To open the case from opening opposition, leader of opposition, the floor is yours. Here.
I think forgiveness is referring to say, okay, I'm moving on in the past time. How do it manifest? Forgiveness is actually happening when the times that you get into your toxic relationship has just moved on. Then you know that, okay, I'm just gonna forgive my past partner, for example. This how the concept of forgiveness is not actually to say sorry if your partner certainly do a bad things for you. It's actually to forget what your partner has been done to you in the past. I think the concept of forgiveness is to accept a bad things to happen, okay, OG, but it doesn't happen in the concept of getting, it doesn't happen in the concept that you are not going to get out of toxic relationship, for example. Why? It's in the concept that you still have a choices regardless. Means the scenario are, you can get out, but also forgive them to not create the sense of revenge. What is actually the manifestation of forgiveness? Is actually to counterbalance what is you call a revenge, a sense of revenge. Meaning, you forgive all the things that they have done to you, but regardless, the choice are not limited that you want to be with them or even not with them. For example, like, okay, I want to get out of this relationship, but I want to forgive my past boyfriend, my ex-boyfriend, for example, for being toxic for me, for example. That is still included in the point of forgiveness. I don't know how the OG would cater to this, but even if so, we're gonna cater to this, to their kind of scenario. This means forgiveness have a multiple spectrum, like I'm trying to portray to you, that it's happening in the forgiving in the past time itself. But even if we cater to their case, it will still be good anyways. Firstly, it's gonna be still seen as virtue because forgive comes with a bargaining. E.g., you forgive your partner, but still told them to be more gentle. For example, if your partner is toxic, you're gonna tell them, okay, I'm gonna forgive you, but then you don't need to do this anymore. You don't need to do that anymore. Meanwhile, it's gonna give the bargaining position to the actually people that want to forgive them to actually seen as a more powerful in the bargaining concept. But it's bring the sense, that you are more bigger hearted. How do human desire to actually have a more bigger hearted or even more of a controllable ego than other human? I think the more controllable ego is actually a self-defense mechanism from your side to actually, integrate yourself to actually proving yourself as superior than other. How do forgiveness actually fit this kind of ego? Exactly because forgiveness, you're gonna know that you sacrifice your ego in sake for other people. You're gonna think, oh, I'm a bigger hearted because I forget their mistake. Therefore, I'm more superior than them because at least I'm saying sorry to them. This means I'm more adult than them. This means the concept of virtue for this kind of forgiveness still exists even though you're not having a choices. But then coming up to our kind of contextualization. What is kind of virtue and why forgiveness is included? Firstly, as the value of virtue to you as an individual, we think the concept of forgiveness are not gonna fly in the concept of individual, but B, forgiveness is actually happening in the spectrum of two people, include the forgiver and the one who actually received the forgiveness. Now, how we judge virtue based on the actor involved in the act of forgiveness. To the receiver, we think it's 2 points. It's still in the concept of virtue because you certainly let go of your own ego for the sake of their convenience. For example, your perceiver, for example, which means it will receive as an act of mengalah that perceive as kindness by other people in the norms in the status quo, which means if you say sorry, you're gonna perceive you have a bigger hearted by the society itself. But B, then this perception mostly inherently fit the concept of forgiveness being a virtue is relevant to the perceiver itself. But what happened to the giver or even to one who actually give the forgiveness? It's gonna be seen as an act of virtue because see the naturality of human, they are inherently prioritizing themselves, which is actually what OG trying to argue, which any of kind of act outside of prioritizing this individual, this natural behavior would act as two things. This would act either as bad or even as virtue thing to do. But B, in the concept of forgiveness, when you actually as an individual know that other people see you doing a virtue by how the perceiver see you that, okay, this giver of forgiveness actually forgive me for something, I do think you're gonna manifest is as a sender of forgiveness. For example, as you think, okay, my perceiver perceive me as I am the one that actually kind to say sorry to the one who actually receive my forgiveness, for example. Then it's gonna be manifest to you as an individual, assuming you do a virtue because you think other people would see this as a virtue. And I do believe I explained to you why other people would still see this forgiveness as a virtue, for example. But then, hence, it's relevant also in the context of who is actually included in the forgiving process. Like I explained to you, there's the sender or even there's the receiver, for example. But then, when we talk about concept, I think the concept itself is a consensus within so many people, and how it is still relevant as a concept when we actually catering to the spectrum of people that have consensus regarding this concept. We think how people see value of of virtue are actually few, the general people, first as an act of prioritizing more broader urgency. In the case that, okay, you help to rescue other people in the fire, for example, therefore you're perceived as a good person, for example, because people believe to you that that you actually sacrificing your own needs in regards of the other safety, for example, which mean the concept of forgiveness being a virtue is actually okay, is to move on or even to let go, but it's actually the kind of thing that, okay, I'm not gonna prioritize my own thing, instead I'm gonna prioritize other people. How then it is still included in the spectrum of forgiveness, for example? I do think it's gonna be on few points. I do think A is gonna still in the concept of forgiveness, for example, exactly because forgiveness main point is actually to prioritize other people think, for example. I do think a sense kind of move on, for example, or even let go, for example, is an act to you as an individual to actually sacrifice your own need in order for the convenience for other people. This is why the concept of forgiveness manifests as you is actually doing a kind thing to other people, for example, or even manifest that as actually a sense to you to actually control your ego, for example. But then, how was the control of ego happen in the forgiveness to making it a virtue? And ego itself is actually a self-defense for you to actually prioritizing yourself. How then, if you are not prioritize our ego in the spectrum of we give forgiveness as a virtue, it will be seen eventually as a virtue. Because firstly, we think is if that is exactly because ego itself is actually prioritizing to you as an individual. Therefore, the act of this forgiveness happen. It manifests to you as an individual. Okay, I'm just gonna prioritizing the other, not prioritizing my ego. Means I have a control of my ego eventually. Which means if I get control of my ego to actually do this kind of forgiveness, for example, I'm gonna perceive myself as a virtue. And I do think the consensus of people that actually you controlling your own ego is actually become a virtue. So that's why the concept of forgiveness being a virtue is actually still relevant.
Thank you, LO, for the fine speech. To extend the case from opening government, DPM, the floor is yours. Here.
Not, not everyone wants to be a good person. Some people are simply do not want to be a good person, and I think we should value people who want to be a good person. I think when this is a virtue, the one who is the most impacted by these kind of things is the good people. The people are trying to do good things. Exactly what OO told you. OO gives you the explanation that ego is very hard to control. It is something hard to prioritize other people and put them above you. That's why it should be a good thing. Here's the thing, we do agree with that. We do agree the fact that putting other people above yourself, controlling your ego, is going to be something hard. But that is exactly why, because of this, we want you to have at least some kind of control of your relationship. We want you to have some kind of at least reward for trying to do your best, because in our side, you are able to opt out into bad relationship. You are able to have agency in your life. And this I'm going to, that's two things that is going to be good in our side. And three, how then this will also impact the world as another benefit. So how does this look like? I think number one, about their review independent rebuttals first. One, they talk about you still have a choice. Here's the thing, the one who's going to be impacted with this kind of virtue do not have a choice here, because you want to be a good person. And if you want to be a good person, it's as if you have to forgive these kind of people if you want to achieve your goal. Some people, the one who we want to champion here are the people who want actually to be a good person. Therefore, the one who's the most affected by this kind of virtue, right? I think what comes as the expectation of forgiveness, it means that it means the public what people expect to you is at least you are above the conflict, you are able to, for example, let it go, and you are able to come back from the situation, and you are able to, for example, talk to those person without even caring about them. This is the direct, at least the social perception of what a forgiveness look like. This is why sometimes forgiveness is not good, because for you to forgive, what society expects you to do, at least in forgiveness, is for you to, for example, forget about everything and go back to as it normal and maintaining that relationship. We say maintaining all relationship is not going to be good, right? Because if you do not have the ability to opt out onto bad relationship, it means that because you have limited capacity, it limits your capacity to get into new relationship that is good for you, right? So exactly because when you are in a trap and you do not have an opt-out mechanism that is in a bad relationship, you cannot get into good relationship, because simply this kind of relationship usually, yeah, it's limited by your own capacity. We think it's very good for you, and I think my PM already told you how then by having forgiveness, you do not feel bad for you when you, for example, don't forgive them. When you know that they have messed up, when you know that they did things that you are not comfortable with, and therefore you are okay to take action with. This is something that the message you're going to give to this kind of good people, right? When some people do bad and you don't forgive them, this is not the good people's fault. It's exactly that those people who hurt you, and we want to help them, and we do not want this as if that these people who are actually trying to be good to be punished, right? They're exactly what our point here. We do not want you to punish the good people, because we know not everyone is going to be good, right? When people are genuinely good, it's always a constant commitment. Exactly what they said, right? To be a good person, at least to be the process of committing to be a good person, you always have to self-reflect. You have to always self-evaluate. You always have to challenge that self-ideal of yourself that you have, which I think generally human also always have. Always want to have, like, you know, an ideal self that I perceive, right? The thing with being a good person, you are always constantly challenging that ideal to be better. That is why it is so hard to be a good person. Exactly in what they said. To prioritize other people, to, for example, control your ego is exactly something hard. That's why we want this. The benefit that PM told you. The agency of, you know, controlling your life. You do not already, as you know, there is birth lottery, and you need to have some agency in life. That is the benefit of having at least control in these kind of things. But two, you do not feel bad, and you have at least better check and balance to get at least to have access to those kind of happiness in this kind of relationship, because we know this is the benefit that you're going to get. I don't think that bad people will be. I don't think bad people, when they do not want to be a good person, for example, in i.e., you know, those people who always enjoy life and don't think about the consequences, or at least wanting to be a good person, most likely this virtue of this concept is not going to be affected by you, right? It's most likely those people, you know, who cares about being a good person, who cares about making their life. That have the intention to have a good life, right? But before that, yeah, sure.
Being a good person is hard, regardless of forgiveness or not. Meaning the concept of forgiveness as a virtue is still relevant. What is your answer?
Here's the thing. We know that I think the PM already told you that by being able to opt out to a bad relationship and having, for example, not forgiving, for example, is good for certain benefit. I don't think it means when you do not forgive, for example, it means that when you see someone does bad things to you, you suddenly get out of the relationship. I think there's still a process here, right? I think they still have accessibility of happiness here. I think they're still, you know, evaluating if they are good or not. But at least in our side, if it's in the worst case scenario, when it is a bad relationship, when you know, it's most likely very harmful for you. You have so much differences to a point that these people have, you know, does things that intentionally or intentionally does bad things to you. You at least here are able to opt out and try to find new things, because the urgency here, if you are not able to get opt out, it means again you are limiting yourself to get into good relationship. You limit yourself to get actually accessibility and happiness, because we know usually you do get good. The way you usually get happiness is usually through relationship. It's probably one of the most biggest contributing factor that is is accessible to you, right? Because relationship is usually, for you to get in a relationship, you need to, for example, to be a good person, or at least appeal to this person. And I think it's the most accessible in comparison to other happiness, like, you know, money or having a privileged things. This is exactly the most accessible thing to you, because when you are able to, you know, opt out into bad relationship, you are able to get into this kind of, you are able to access this kind of happiness exactly because your human capital is limited. Here's the thing, judges. What we have proven to you is forgiving some people is okay. We have forgiven this kind of people. We want to champion this kind of people because most likely the one who is impacted are those people who's trying to achieve that virtue, trying to be a good person. We want to champion that. We want to save those kind of good people. Therefore, proud to propose.
Thank you, DPM, for the fine speech. Just a gentle reminder, for those who giving POI, please use the microphone. And if the podium is too high, you can basically just set aside that, ya, itunya yang buat berdiri bisa dipinggirin biar mikrofonnya kena. So once again, please use the microphones to ensure that the audio is in the live stream. Cool. Let's continue the debate. DLO, floor is yours. Here.
Test. Starting my trigger warnings, there may be some sensitive words. That said, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think it's a very vicious world where you're limited by your ego. You cannot reconnect with other people. You have things that you are unable to heal because you keep it all as grudges in your heart, and you don't have satisfaction in the end because you don't have anything to lower your grudge and your ego. We think it's a very vicious world where people eventually keep doing bad things with each other with no incentive to repair what their bad things are, to at least make other people's life better, because in this world you already have the mindset that nobody is forgiving. So it's a dog-eat-dog world in the end, and the act of altruism will not happen in the end because you will not by anyone. This is what the government war is gonna be. Quoting OG, forgiveness some things are not good means that they say that sometimes it is good. Then we ask that what is the urgency that you are trying to say to state that this is obsolete? Because we do believe you have to take a braver stance to actually establish that forgiveness is a virtue that is not relevant anymore for in order for your case to stand, right? And even if it's about opt-exit and agency, we think that we already explained why forgiveness happen in view spectrum, which means that it is flexible. You can forgive people for any kinds of mistakes, and we will explain to you how this will create the benefit and the satisfaction in the end. So what is the burden of proof for the government? It's simple. If the government want to win, they have to demonstrate in the first place how forgiveness is entirely unnecessary, entirely. And I will divide my speech to extension to Rona and what happens in RO, how all the benefit that government takes actually doesn't matter and will still exist when forgiveness is good. So what actually happens when you forgive people? How do there is a problem that exists in the first place that we want to bring this concept? It's because people hold grudges against each other in the first place. Humans are social people. It's inherently necessary for us to work and cooperate with others. And in the ordinary life, you will meet people from all kind of background and personality. And let's see how this exists in the first place. It's because humans inherently have the ego. How we analyze this ego is a natural part of human life, something you need to keep check for yourself. But let's see that it's also a double-edged sword, how it keeps increasing. It is things that make you become selfish, unforgiving, and vengeful. And it often runs contrary to what humans need, since inherently human needs cooperation with each other. The most often time people get into trouble with each other is because of this ego is blinding them, because they listen to this and refuse to reason with their ego. Then this is how virtue comes into the frame, as it is something good that we think that's necessary for human life to function. And this is where forgiveness is inherently part of it, since it's as like a self-control mechanism for your ego, right? How do this happen? It's forgiveness. We think that it actually lowers your ego, because it is a way for you to release your ego, all of your feeling of being grudge, being vengeful towards other people, which happen inherently because you also let your ego go to high. So this practice that you already use in forgiveness naturally is a form of training, a way for you to become more reasonable, right? This is the benefit that goes exclusively into us. And now let's see how this virtue is perceived. Since the characteristic of virtue, it has to be seen as an inherent goodness that is accepted by everyone. And what it is actually an act of goodness and altruism that you will be appreciated to give. And I will extend how this relevant goes into both parts. As the receiver, it is something good when you are forgiven by people you have problems with. We will bite the bullet that when you forgive someone, this is a gamble and you cannot expect people to receive it as a goodness because some people nggak tahu diri. But we think that this is still valid because people still have self-worth. People will still feel guilty when they slighted someone. Furthermore, even if this feeling of guilty did not exist, remember that humans are still social person. If the narrative that forgiveness is a virtue does not exist, then people will have no incentive to reconnect with each other, to be a genuinely good person anymore. Because let's go all out, right? The world is such a vicious place when nobody is able to forgive each other even for the slightest mistakes, because you've eliminated it as a virtue. And eliminating incentive to do good, so people will do good, essentially forgive people in return. This is the mechanism that will ensure that people will still have an incentive to be altruistic in our side. Because these things happen in our side, people will be willing to forgive someone. People will not be willing to let it being such a dog-eat-dog world. And the second, as the giver, as the person who forgives, you trade off what you feel hurt with the acceptance of other people and a chance to cooperate with them again, to mend the relation back to them. We will preemptive all questions about self-worth, how you don't have satisfaction when someone does bad to you, by saying that this fulfillment in the first place comes because deep down there is something that makes you feel lower to them. This is why you hate other people in the first place. This is why your ego told you to go all in and just shut them down. You wish the worst for them because you feel inferior to them. This is why you hate other people, right? But actually, this happens on our side as well. When you forgive other people, in our world where forgiving others is a virtue, the fact that you are seen by bigger person by everyone, a virtuous person, being more than whatever your enemy can achieve in their faults, gives you the inherent feeling of superiority back. So all your hate, which is based on you feeling being the inferior person, is actually mended back by we giving a place of importance to forgiveness. Because at least you are a bigger, a more mature, and a better person than the one who you hate, who people will fall and look lower because they slighted you, and at least you become better than them in the end. Therefore, the question of whether it's a good thing or not are resolved by both sides, making forgiveness an inherent good, an inherent virtue that we actually have to consider. This is where their case falls. And moving on to our world, how people will still perceive happiness in our world. We think that it's a very bad thing when people can connect again with each other and establish relation back with each other because vengeful feeling exists between them. Imagine if you're a child and your parents divorce, when you're forced to cut off relationship with one of your parents because the other thinks so. We think that this feeling is lost. It's very minimalistic to say that this cannot be rekindled because you don't want to forgive other people. How will you gain satisfaction if you can forgive them? We think people's happiness depend on how they live their life to the fullest, how they have the sense of fulfillment when they connect to other people. That is what gives happiness. Because no human can live alone, right? Even if you have bad experience for another person, with another person, for example, with your boss, you still need some sense to reconnect because you need him. Even if you have problems with your ex, you need some sense to reconnect eventually because there's an emotional baggage that you left there. This is why people try to do good to strangers. There's an incentive in the legal system not to punish people to the fullest extent because they know that people will change, right? We think it's such a vicious world when you let ego control everything. You don't have a mechanism to self-balance, to lower your vengeful feeling. Because in the end, the world will be just a place where we can't trust anyone because nobody is able to forgive each other. We believe that everyone makes mistakes. Therefore, it's important to have forgiveness as a check and balance so people will still have good incentive to do good things towards each other. Because they're not perfect. And even then, if they're not perfect, people will still accept their mistakes and be the bigger person because it's encouraged. And people will actually perceive the person who forgives as the better person, giving you the satisfaction in life. It is something that everyone wants to aspire, right? This is why we think that the government cannot answer their burden, why the forgiveness is actually meaningless, and this is why we have established what is the important forgiveness, what is the good, and that's why we think we are proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, DLO, for the fine speech. To open the case from closing half, Member of Government, the floor is yours. Here.
Test. For POI, you can raise your hand. Maybe I will take one from CO or OO, yeah, whatever. So, okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Wait, I'm sorry, belum kepencet. I will start again my speech in 3, 2, 1. Simply opening debate talk to you what happen if people forgive and not. But it's not the BOP. I think the BOP just as simple what the principal concept of virtue and why forgiveness is fulfill that concept, especially when we're reflecting the experience. Firstly, let's talk about OG. I think as coming from OG is forgiveness even can make people considering themselves as a good person, but they cannot to achieve happiness from it. A lot of example like toxic relationship and etc. But I will still not get a point why happiness is the output of virtue, because honestly when you are doing virtue, people will silence because they think that is a common action that you need to do. But when you are not doing virtue, people will criticize you. It means the happiness that they try to bring in this debate isn't the output of the virtue based on the how society look to the virtue. But okay, let's talk about OO. OO talk about why forgiveness is good, but they never explain their BOP, which is why it's relevant with virtue. But bunch of response here. First, they say forgive equal with self-defense. It means it's the way for human to forgetting what people do. It's not a virtue, because virtue not lead into suffering. It's giving a relief. But when we talk about nature of human, they can simply think that they forget it, but inherently no, because all of the moment in your life is recorded in your unconsciousness. This is why people normally feel depressed, but they cannot to find the reason. This is why people get hypnotherapy to realize that condition in the status quo. But B, the wording of self-defense, it means you still get a threat right in that situation. But at the same time, they say it's the way for them to prioritize another person. So I think it's backlash also proof why in this side will create vulnerability because you are not prioritize yourself. But secondly, virtue is not talk about another person. It's talk about you feel better. When you not feel better for it, it's delusion coming from the false narrative of the virtue. This also make all extension coming from DLO is not important. Because see, when they say forgiveness, make people still can connect it with each other. I think it's not relevant with the value of virtue. Exactly, we don't want to consider forgiveness as a virtue because in the side of the house you make people take a wrong step. You get a pressure to still connecting with another person that hurts you when you live in the middle of billion person in this world who can better for your life. So in this side you trap them in this kind of this relationship. This way this is why at the end you will not considering is a good option. This is why it's not can to be value as a virtue. But let's talk about something that missing coming from the opening. What principle value of virtue? First, to determine the moral character of an action without giving a harm for yourself and another person. So the objective of virtue is how you make a harmony with a good intrinsic beliefness in the status quo in the society. But secondly, virtue is pushed by the society to make or give the solution or what kind of action that you need to believe you need to take in that moment. So what the role of virtue? Exact value that you should do to get a good level of action. And if you not do that, it's unfavorable and get criticized because you are not wise, for example. So simply looks like a norms. So the BOP is why it obsolete or irrelevant with the virtue. Firstly, forgiveness is the way you try to forget someone fault to you. Yeah, what they said is true. So you get a harm for it. For example, you feel anger, anxious, depressed, and etc. So intrinsically, you have an option or right to react with that situation considering the human dignity principle. So inherently, you should have choice react it. And virtue is not a choice. It's something that mandatory for you to do. This is why it's not relevant because there is a harm that you get from it, especially for the individual that should forgive another person in the opposition side. This principle be the prerequisite of example coming from OG about why virtue should be guarantee people can avoid the harm and why the virtue not a non-mandatory action. This is why we should believe why with our stance in the government side. But before that, POI, OO, or CO? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Secondly, when the society always use it to take advantage from it, it means it's the beginning how they establish it as a virtue is manipulating the society. So it's not just about the implementation, but also how this narrative is born. The process is it's not coming from the consensus from the society. Because when we talk about the prerequisite of virtue, it should be consensus from the society. Right now, people always questioning why people should forgive another people's fault. It means that there is no consensus here. But But why this manipulation is happen in the status quo? Because there is no proper information in the future, in the past. For example, when right now people already concerned in the mental health issue, for example, they already know that they have a choice to not forgive another person if that condition make you feel better, for example, because you can to like avoiding that person, you can like just getting angry with them without like feel that yeah they are just change or another things, because we think the second objective of virtue is how you feel you take a good action. It means when there is a better proper information right now, people starting to think that forgiveness is not relevant with virtue because it's not mutually beneficial for its entity and it's just giving a suffering for the people that should be forgive into another person. This explanation prove into you the process why in this condition people start to believe why forgiveness is not equal with virtue. It's also the prerequisite to make a bridge why all of the example coming from OG can run in this debate. But before that, another POI. CO. Okay, monggo.
How will altruism and goodness work in a world where people are not able to forgive each other and people are not able to forgive each other for the slightest of
Judge, altruism or how people feel good or something, be a good person, etc. It's a common sense without this virtue about forgiveness. You always think that your parents is born to you and just teach to you to be a good person. So in our side of the house, even the forgiveness is not a virtue, for example. You're still trying right to be a good person because you cannot to get forgiveness easily from another person. So it means the prerequisite for you to get a forgiveness in the future, for example, because it's not a virtue, for example, yeah, you change. You better be a better person. So it's the prerequisite for you to make how the people can still believing again in you without giving a harm into you. So this is why, at the end of the day, without the virtue about the forgiveness, it's a better environment that we create in the government side. So okay, lastly, because they cannot give the POI, I will give awaying why in this by at the end of the day, CG should win in this debate. Because firstly, I think when we talk about the vulnerability of the actor, we can to give an explanation why at the end of the day this virtue can give them a suffering thing. For example, how a minority should be to like forgive to the majority. For example, how you as a woman that get a really suffering or bad condition coming from men, you should to forgive and etc. Because in our side you don't have the responsibility to forgive it to them because it's not a virtue. It means the society will not push into you. But secondly, I think when we talk about the BOP, we give to you a better BOP about why at the end of the day the forgiveness is not something that relevant with the principle of the virtue itself. But thirdly, let's we talk about how we can mechanize what kind of the principle of the virtue or the explanation why it's sweet with the, it's not sweet with the virtue. We give you a better explanation about why this is something that personally not consensus but the society, and secondly, it's not giving a mutually beneficial for each other. So this is why it's not relevant to propose.
Thank you, Member of Government, for that fine speech. Gentle reminder, guys, please use the microphone when you give POI. To open case from closing opposition, Member of Opposition, floor is yours. Here.
Okay, check. Okay, I'm fine. So I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Their mistakes is not your fault, but your decision is your responsibility. That's what CO value in this debate. But before that, before I explain what's happening in this debate and wrap it up, I'm going to give a major rebuttals on how CG is really irrelevant in this debate. On the terms of forgive means forget. 3 layers of analysis and rebuttals in terms of this. First, this is a false state, judges. If forgive means forget, then what's the use of apologizing and mediations in the status quo that exists, right? Or simply having a formal and legal apologize if it's just to be forgotten, it's something a waste in the status quo that came from CG. In fact, you can forgive, but you don't have to forget, because the essence of true forgiveness is that CO wants to refer to exclusively is to the real definitions itself of forgiveness, right? The moment you forgive, it means that there's a process for you to individually to take a step or having kind of self-mediations on what kind of process you want to take. And it's no longer decided by the people on what kind of the decisions or the deadline, for example, for people to take this kind of apologize or forgiveness, but it depends on you, on how, what kind of terms or how long will you want to take in order for you to forgive someone. And also we believe that what kind of we want to pursue this kind of apologize or even this kind of forgiveness through the process or the having to normalize this kind of mediations or even counseling that exists in the status quo. It's okay, it's fine, it doesn't mean that you are problematic, but in fact it is something that need to appreciate the moment you take the kind of progress. So second layer, even if I eat that unstated, there's an unstated norm in society you have to forget. On our side, these people will not forget the problem just like that, right? They will evaluate it to make a self-improvement in our side, not just controlling ego like OO told you, because it's really kind of irrelevant the moment you just stop by controlling or stopping your ego. But it told you, but more on how yourself to you make the kind of definitions on what kind the wiser you are, or what you make a statement of the happiness, what kind of happiness you want in the long term, right? Because we believe that the moment you offer to forgiveness, you appreciate yourself, you appreciate the hard truth or the breakthrough you have given to yourself or personally. To the case of, let me tell you on the case of OG. OG is being selfish in this debate actually, and in terms of human deserve to be happy. Let me rebut it to you because the OO haven't got it specifically. First layers. Yes, I agree, but let's say the happiness is exclusive on their side. I also want a happy world, like we all are. Let me visualize what kind of happiness that happened on OG. The happiness will be a short-term happiness because the stage of move on without forgiveness, OG will just bury the grief instead of deal with it and shut it down from life. For example, I was done by my partner and being okay with that by having grudge just make me moving on under the sentiment that leads me to do revenge, or the moment I met him, my trauma will come to the surface because I haven't dealt with it yet. From that context, the happiness on government side will be short-term and the output is a bad vibe like sentiment or eager of revenge. So OG, if you want a world to be peaceful because everyone just having a silent cold war, I don't want to live in it. Second layers, even if my pursuing forgiveness doesn't make happiness, okay, but the moment we can value acceptance, it is more important at its very best. I'm not happy to be cheated, but I accept that I dump him to avoid me further toxicity. By acceptance, even if you have to be disadvantaged by the problem, at least you can be a living testimony for others, or you can be a wise mom or mentor to tell your relative, or having self-reminder that all of this just making me stronger and wiser, and the meaning of life is more beautiful the moment you can be testimony guidance for others. So that's why you should weigh the debate, because we believe that it is really irrelevant and exclusive. But tell me, I will tell you further on why we are the only exclusive and relevant in this debate. Let me tell you on the case of the concept of forgiveness and its value to virtue. That's the major case. This motion exists because there's a confusion of statement in the status quo like move on and enjoy life, or get that man revenge they deserve. Those kind of narratives simply drive a person become someone they are not because they take a further action based on the opinion. Hence, the damn or less satisfaction for this individual cannot be shifted to those narratives, and the sum of regret only be the pill for the individual itself for being driven by others' perspective in making decisions. Here's what CO bring to the table in terms of personal benefit. Forgiveness is something crucial to be pursued because as a person, the moment you are in a toxic or hard situations with a mixed feeling, they tend to be irrational in giving decisions and expressing their feeling. Yes, we know it's natural, but decision of post the scene is what's crucial. Forgiveness makes you to clear up the cloud in the head, get you to think strategically what kind of decision you want to make if in the context of someone make mistake to you. My likelihood is a forgiveness is a process. You can't just forgive and forget like that. Hence, by the value of forgiveness, you can think what's the best for you to deal with it. For example, your family called you as a failure. By pursuing forgiveness, you can prioritize yourself rationally, either to take the statement or as it is, take the statement as it is, or prove that you are wrong. No, later. This internal rationality is really crucial in this debate, and we just haven't brought by the opening and CG. Why is it important and justified? First, you deserve to be happy and prioritize yourself and give what's the best for yourself regardless what the problem is, right? Second, rationality makes you take a better decision. Compare if you are let your emotion drives you further, that makes you are unable to have a strategic move just to prove them wrong. For example, my friend told me that I can proceed to NUDC, and look, we are. It motivates me to get this far. It proves to you that this kind of forgiveness makes me become someone better. It proves you that not every statement is true. It just makes me someone who better to prove them in a better way, in a proper way, instead of revenge that brought by this OG. It proves to those things. The urgency proves you two things. First, forgiveness is beneficial in internal or personal terms, which you can mediate with yourself and give what you deserve. Second, it proves to you that the benefit of pursuing this giving self-development that makes you can learn from their mistake. This cope-up mechanism is crucial for you not to jump in the same hole, because you cannot rely on someone become a perfect human being unless because the reason we are called human in the first place because the sins is on blood. Hence, the only peaceful solution is by virtue of this statement to yourself. Don't ask me why it's still relevant right now, because actually the reason why we happen in this debate, because as long as we alive, mistake is still appear, toxic environment are come without our consent. So the only way for us to keep relevant is through forgiveness, and that's why we can have a self-betterment, which is not happen brought by opening other cases, and we believe pursuing it means self-betterment. Thank you.
Thank you, Member of Opposition, for the fine speech. To give the last substantive in government bench, GovWeb, the floor is yours. Here.
Am I audible? Hello, am I audible? Let me order my paper. Let me start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, people can't be perfect, but it doesn't mean that we should be responsible for their imperfection. Let me explain. What our side wants is really simple, panels. We don't think forgiveness as an act is no longer should be valued. We think that forgiveness as an act should no longer be valued as a virtue simply because in status quo, we know better. We grow as a society. Let me explain. Extension on my member case will be put inside my responses. I'll mention it when it comes up. Firstly, I'm going to tell you the difference that our side have with OG. OG think that the concept for forgiveness as a virtue is principally wrong because it would danger human path to happiness and challenge their narrative of self, an inherent instinct in human being to be a good person, or the heroism that they want to feel in that narrative. Although OG point is correct and we agree with it, OG case couldn't run without our analysis. In the term for obsolation of it, our side believes that it is obsolete because in status quo, human beings are more aware on the way through to preserve themselves and more aware of the mental health issue that came from not preserving yourself. And it is sad that they are obligated to forgive people just to be seen as a good person in the society that has already been developed. Second, OG have explained a lot on how forgiveness look like when they are being applied to relationship scenario, but our side think that before forgiveness concept could be applied in a relationship scenario, we should analyze this relationship intrinsically first on ourselves as individual and as a human being. That is the backbone of our case or of my member case, right? Here's 5 response to OO. OO said that the concept of forgiveness is false since it is born out of the OO concept of forgiveness is false since it is born out of the generalization of people reaction when in reality people are different. But people wrongfulness is also different in terms of severity. So their concept is not really inclusive in painting a factual picture on what this would look like. Second, OO said that if you forgive people, it's an act of virtue because then you let go of your ego, right? Wrong. As my member has explained, virtue is a compass to navigate your action as a human being and how to react to a difficult situation properly, right? As a human being. Just by forgiving someone might not exactly be considered as letting go of your ego. Let me explain. Letting go of your ego, that are a more accurate description of letting go of your ego is not the act of forgiving itself, but the act of asking for forgiveness. Because people who ask for forgiveness admit that mistake, and that's a more suitable definition and picturization of what letting down or letting go of your ego is that OO didn't bring. Hence why in the act of forgiving itself couldn't be classified as virtuous, because in the end of the day, forgiveness shouldn't be mandatory, but it should be a choice. Letting go is virtuous, but you tweak the real meaning of it to fulfill your own egoistical objective. That is not very virtuous of you all. Third, OO said that in order to be virtuous, all think that human being could not put their self first. This is also incorrect, since in order to be virtuous onto other, you have to be able to be virtuous on yourself first. By not prioritizing your own well-being, there's a high likeliness that you will be unable to enact virtuous act onto others, either because you are unhappy with yourself or regretful of your action and etc. of that a very not so good feeling. In order to be virtuous of other, you need to have a sense of self-fulfillment, as what my members have said. Without this, you will feel resentful and more vengeful, unlike what they say, right? And you will ended up focusing on that unpleasant feeling itself instead of focusing on actually enacting virtuous act onto other, unlike what OO said, right? For OO said, if incentive of forgiveness doesn't exist, people won't have incentive to reconnect with each other. This is also wrong, because there's an incentive for people to reconnect with each other for a couple of reasons. For 2 reasons. First, the wrongfulness that have been enacted upon them is not as severe. Or second, nostalgia of relationship exists. And even then, in this debate, it's not about forgiveness versus no forgiveness at all, but a debate about the value of forgiveness as a mandatory action that humans should take in order to be a virtuous human being. Our side is highly against this, because if you yourself don't want to forgive someone wrongdoing, you shouldn't be forced to do it just because the society told you it's the right thing to do. The 5th thing that OO said, relationship could be helped in reaching self-fulfillment. Also wrong, because as I've said, a sense of fulfillment is a highly intrinsic feeling. If you rely on your self of fulfillment onto other, then you will never be fulfilled. Proven by the fact that you can't control others' action, but you can control your reaction or action on yourself, right? A little response to CO. CO whole case is that people can be appreciative of yourself if forgiveness is mandatory in order to achieve self-improvement, right? I already explained this in my response on why exactly it's better in our side for self-discovery purposes, because people are different and you can't generalize them or create a general accusation on how to be a good human being. I have explained on how making it mandatory won't fix anything. Just because it doesn't necessarily mean just because you are a forgiving person, that doesn't necessarily immediately make you a very virtuous person. Hence why it is obsolete. In the end of the day, the main BOP of each team is clear panels. Government BOP is they have to prove why forgiveness is not obsolete as a concept in the fulfillment of have to prove why forgiveness is obsolete as a concept in the fulfillment of virtuousness as a human being. To prove you are a virtuous human being in order to achieve higher sense of self. Opposition BOP is to prove why they think the concept of forgiveness is in fact very important in the journey to achieve fulfillment in your time existing as a human being. Although OG has brought some good point in the effort to fulfill that BOP, without the prerequisite of my member case, I don't think their case could be considered complete. Hence why we should be credited for the new analysis and contribution that we have brought in this discussion. Because I have easily flipped all my opposition logical reasoning, hence leaving them with nothing to fulfill their BOP, hence why they lost in this debate, hence why this motion should stand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Government Whip, for the fine speech. To give the last substantive speeches in this debate, Opposition Whip, the floor is yours. Here.
I do not understand why this debate is about forgiving each other externally when I think we could frame it in a unique way, right? Which is to forgive ourselves first. Because I think the whole benches are also forgetting that forgiving ourselves is also important, because when forgiveness does not only comes by external relationship, but also comes on by the regrets that we have, by the things that my mistakes also comes to ourselves individually, when they all argue about individual benefits, when they argue that every single things goes back to the individual coping mechanism, then that means that the forgiveness, the first step to reach that kind of satisfaction, the first step to reach that kind of forgiving is to first forgive yourself for letting those kind of things, for letting those kind of mistakes came to your life and change yourself in the end of the day, right? CO believe that everything that the benefit, all of the benches taught you that are on individual level. So I think the first step is to forgive yourself before doing anything else. Forgive yourself for of investing a lot of time into your toxic partners when you know that they are toxic but you still love them, for example. Forgive yourself first. Forgive yourself for prioritizing other over your own happiness when you know that you are sacrificing your happiness, when you are sacrificing all of that things for your partners, but you still do not get what you want, but you still trying to preach and you try to also to be reliant to them. Forgive yourself first for that mistakes for yourself, and to also from the overall and the general things is that regrets exist in our life, right? Regrets over the mistakes that we do, regrets over the things that we are not enough to do in the past, regrets over the time that goes above us. We have to forgive ourselves internally, and that's the extension, the idea that all the benches does not engage, and why CO deserves to put this on the table, and why we think this is still relevant, right? So comparing to all the cases then, why we think that this is important when you still have to think that the exclusive benefit of forgiveness does not only come in external relation, but also including forgiving yourself in this scenario. First of all, coping mechanism come from yourself. This means forgiving yourself while putting trust to your toxic partner, for example, by what OG have told you before, or by what OO told you about the egoistic values of not wanting to lose over your ego, starts from the first thing, which is to forgive yourself for the overall mistakes, because for your overall mistakes, right? Because I think this impact of your individual comfortability stands you as an individual. When it's more virtuous that you might let some mistakes to happen, and you accept that this kind of mistakes does not only also come externally, but also you that letting those kind of mistakes to go over your life and change your life, that is the action of virtuous itself, right? Because you are accepting that you might also do certain mistakes, and that's an action of virtuous, because you are willing to accept yourself as a person that is not enough, and you are willing to improve going from that kind of things. When you forgive that you forgive that you are not enough, and the next step, you're trying to fit that and you try to improve, and that's where the virtues come, because you are willing to let go of those kind of things. You're willing to let go of your egos because to ascend to other next stage of your life, right? But the second of all, the idea of forgiveness doesn't only resolve around other people doing bad things to you, right? But in the broader case, the scenario that CEO has told you before involved in whatever things that you do in life, which is some things that resolve regrets, which things that resolve around whatever that we do in individually, right? Because I don't think that we spend just most of our lifetime just thinking and focusing about our relationship with our toxic partners, but it resolves more around with what we do in life. For example, when I regret that I do not study enough, when I do not practice enough for my debate, in debate, for example, I have regrets in that. And I have to forgive myself before I need to improve myself, and telling you that doing and learning this kind of thing should be done faster enough in before. The idea of improvement that both opening want to champion can only exist if we talk about the forgiveness that come internally. No, thank you, right? First of all, from the individual being that are willing to talk or set things out. I think in comparison to OO and OG, we talks to you first that for things to be sorted out or to things to be letting out, they are in need of individual acceptance to begin with, right? They does not only stops only you forgiving other people, but you have to also forgive yourself, forgive yourself and the things that you have done, and all the things and all the mechanisms to sort every single things out, or to talk out, or to discuss about, to make change, or to accept that things might just the best as it is, have to come first for your own forgiveness. But second of all, I think letting go become much more easier under our side of the house in scenario, right? Because the thing that exists under our side when you're letting and you're forgiving yourself, then that means whatever happens in the end, whether your partner appreciate you, for example, whether a society are giving you judgmental observation when you forgive your partners, or you're not being virtuous, when you forgive yourself, when you accept that this is how you are and this is what you are as it is, then every kind of thing harms, when you try to be friend with your own self, then every single harms could be tackled down, could be unsatisfaction could be tackled down, because satisfactory comes in your individual level, comes into your own self, going past through the harms that you could not even do it in the past. Right? But second of all, even if it doesn't, I think this just work because in this virtue you are a good person. That means when you do this kind of acceptable things, you are seeing yourself as a good person. That kind of coping mechanism amuse yourself over the harms or over the judgmental of things that you do. So even if OG and CG talks you that, oh, there is going to be judgmental views for you, for example, for not being able to forgive someone, but if you do this kind of virtuous action, you have this kind of amusing things, like for you to amuse yourself that, oh, maybe I'm not that great, maybe I'm still, some part are still good, and I'm not the regrettable existence in society because I still do the good thing by forgiving other people and also forgiving myself. Yeah, I think going to the comparison between CO and CG then. Why we think that CO is better than than CG? I think this debate is not about the narrative, but the narrative of why forgiveness as a virtue should be acceptable, but rather the persuasiveness of why then forgiveness as a virtue is still relevant. This is a different debate, right? Because I think when you talk about a perspective, or people will pressure you for doing this, we don't think that the motion states that forgiveness this is the only virtue. The only for you to become a virtuous person is to be forgiven, right? When there is still another virtuous action for you to be done. For example, you still have to be honest. For example, you want to fight evil. You want to fight for justice. It's still a virtuous action and it still exists in our scenario, right? So I don't think all the harms are talking about people forcing you to become forgiven, even if you do not accept that. That implies and stands in this debate. When I think the whole debate have to be shifted to what CO proposed. CO proposes on a scenario. Under that case, I think CO deserve to win. We proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, opposition, for the fine speech. That basically marks the end of the debate. Thank you for all team for what was an interesting debate. As for now, teams may cross floor, shake hand, and please go back to the debaters hall to wait for the breaking announcement later, since this is a silent.